And good evening, this is Tim Johnson. The Brattleboro Selectboard is up next here on BCTV in a special meeting. Tonight, 3 items of unfinished business. The board will further discuss the annual work plan and budget for the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance at a representative town meeting article. Further discussion on the police fire facilities project, including debt service, life cycle cost analysis, and preliminary results from a questionnaire. And the board will also take up the use of fund balance to defray tax expenses in the FY17 budget. The Brattleboro Select Board is next here on BCTV.
Good evening. It's January 12th, 2016. We're here for a special Brattleboro Select Board meeting. We want to welcome anybody who's watching us on TV, and we want to thank everybody who's here in attendance. We want to welcome members of the press and our ASL interpreters and members of staff and administration who are with us as well. We'll convene the meeting. Has it been officially warned? Excellent, thank you. The first item on tonight's agenda is Chair's remarks. I was going to remark how beautiful is the ice out on the retreat meadows and encourage everybody to go skating on the meadows if the snow still allows it tomorrow. Next item on the agenda is Town Manager's comments.
I need to advise the board that we need an executive session this evening. We didn't plan on one, so we didn't notice it ahead of time in the morning for the meeting, but circumstances now warrant us getting together for a few minutes after this meeting to discuss collective bargaining with employees, probable and potential civil litigation, and contracts.
Nope. Nope, sorry.
Next item on the agenda is Select Board comments and committee reports. Are there any Select Board comments or committee reports? Next item on the agenda is public participation. Is there anybody in attendance this evening who wants to speak to something that's not on the agenda? The agenda being the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance, Police Fire Facilities Project, and this year's FY17 budget. Anybody who wants to speak to something that's not on the agenda? The next item is under unfinished business, the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance Annual Work Plan and Budget and Representative Town Meeting Article. I think what I'll do is, just by way of introduction, note that 2 or 3 weeks ago, a number of representatives from the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance were here to present the work plan and the budget, and we had some questions about fund balance and its source, and about some aspects of the work plan that included spending that surplus and making some capital purchases. And so we asked the town manager please to coordinate with the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance to take a look at their financials and to help us understand the source of the surplus. And so I'll ask Peter, what did you learn, please?
So as I set forth in the memorandum dated January 8th that was part of the backup, it took a bit more effort, both on my part and the part of those who were assisting from Downtown Brattleboro Alliance, both current and past. Individuals who've been involved both currently and in the past with finances for the organization. And the reason for that is because of the historical ownership of the River Garden property by the predecessor organization, Building a Better Brattleboro. And so the books are more complicated for the years prior to the sale, back in 2013, of the River Garden property. everything appears to be in order, but it's just harder to tell exactly what was in and what was out. There were organizations that were Building a Better Brattleboro was serving at the time as a fiscal agent for other nonprofit organizations at that time. So those books are more complicated, and I can't really give you an unequivocal answer as to source of surplus, but I didn't see anything that appeared to be amiss from any of those years. The year that the property was sold is exceedingly complicated, and I'm not an accountant, I'm a town manager, and I really can't say one way or the other than, again, everything seems to be in order. It's just because of the write-off related to the remaining value in the property at the time that the property was sold, and it was sold only for the value of the, for the amount of the debt. It was actually, that handed off, and the debt was assumed by the buyer. So that, again, is, in order to be directly responsive to the questions you asked, that's very difficult for me. What I can say unequivocally, because now the books are really nice and clear ever since that sale, is that there is a surplus that has accumulated, an operating surplus that has accumulated on the order of $19,400 and, sorry, I'm doing the math in your head, $19,514.63 is exactly the amount. That part is unequivocal operating surplus from the past 2 fiscal years. And it appears to me, based on the soundness of the books in their more complex form, that the $30,389.02 that's reflected on the books as being the actual amount of the retained earnings currently is a reasonable figure. So therefore, and I've explained in the memorandum as best I can what the sources of that are. So I can say that it was definitely under expenditure of staffing in this past fiscal year, and a combination of under expenditure of staffing along with event and rental income offset by some expense overages in certain other areas for the prior fiscal year.
Anybody on the board have any questions? Those appeared to be the open issues at the time of the last meeting, and so some question had arisen whether we wanted to continue the funding at the same level, or whether we wanted to ask for a different budget in light of the surplus and apply the surplus to reduce the tax rate for the district. Is anybody interested in proceeding that latter way with asking for reduction in the budget or the tax rate in order to apply the surplus? Or do we just want to approve the capital expenditures? Anybody have any preference?
I think we should just accept it and move forward on this.
Okay. Anybody else on the
That's
board
just
have any
mine.
different view?
I mean, there's no impropriety. There's no, it was just an accounting thing, and so I'm, because it goes before their people, and they're the ones that really accepted that budget. So I think we were just looking for where was that money going, and especially a late notice getting the, what was it, the 20,000 notice of overages. But so I'm happy with it.
Everybody's comfortable proceeding that way?
Yeah.
Anybody from the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance want to speak to anything that's going to be decided on? We have a number of motions here to approve the work plan and the budget, and to approve the town meeting article.
The other thing I would say, I appreciate Peter's effort in working with Michelle and myself and other people who are no longer associated with the organization, and their cooperation in terms of trying to find a mathematical error.
And I'd just like to add that my apologies for not being able to attend last time. And to just frame the work of the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance, because I did watch the meeting on TV. And it seems like there's still, some confusion about what we do. And so just to really distill it for the board and for the viewing public, to think of the Downtown Alliance as the marketing and beautification organization for the Downtown Improvement District, and then everything that goes along with that. Having a Downtown Improvement District allows us to be eligible for tax credits, which have helped numerous projects downtown over the years, and I have many, many figures that we can submit and share. So just understanding the work that we are doing now and that we're capable of doing with our proposed 2017 budget, but also with the surplus that is in the current budget. And I'm happy to, if you want to hear all the facts and figures, I've got stacks, but
Oh, God.
I don't think you want to, yeah. I can send them in the memo.
Any further discussion from anybody on the board at this point? Is there anybody who's in attendance who wants to speak to issues relating to the FY17 budget and work plan for the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance?
I just think the only thing that it's helped clear up is that now Peter's more in tune with what's going on at, the Downtown Alliance, and people in the audience and everybody else is just now, because it did go through some flux for a few years. And so now I think it's, with Peter getting involved and all the T's crossed and the I's dotted, I think it's just much better moving forward, so.
I guess what I'll note is that there's two items on the agenda. One is the annual work plan and budget approval, and the second is the representative town meeting article. It doesn't appear that we have in front of us right now the language for the representative town meeting article, so maybe we can put that on the agenda either for the next meeting or for the meeting after for approval, because there is a article that we have to include in the warning. We don't have that specific language here. All right, so we'll defer action on the approval of the representative town meeting article. I move to approve the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance FY17 budget and work plan as presented. No. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right. The next item on the agenda is the police fire facilities project. We have 3 sub-items, and then we'll talk about some procedural issues as well under that broad category of police fire facilities project. So the first one is debt service operating budget forecast and property tax impacts. Peter?
Thank you. So you also have a memorandum dated January 8th in your backup related to that. And it identifies, it basically describes, just the memorandum just describes the attachments. There were several. After you, Mr. Chairman, had an opportunity to review that backup during the weekend, we spoke, and you asked for some amplification and clarification of what was in there. And so we prepared an update to each of those charts that I have here to hand out to the board, and I have some copies for the audience as well.
So this is different than the one that we had.
And
Can I say what the differences are?
please, go ahead.
So there were 2 sets of things that I asked the town manager to compile and to add to the documents that were distributed. And there was one thing I asked to be removed because I thought it was confusing. There's a line that I think contributes to the finance director's calculation of the tax rate, which is called grand list. But it's not really the total value of the grand list. It sits at like $11.5 million. And so we've stricken that line out of the papers that were distributed to us on Friday. And we have also added into the summary chart, which is the first page, what the total principal and interest would be over the life of the project for each of the alternatives. So that's halfway down on the first page. And what it shows now is that the Black Mountain Road option, the total cost of principal would be $12,759,000, and the total principal and interest is $16,962,000 and change. Police option A is then about $13,735,000 total capital, $18,282,000 total principal and interest over the 20-year financing period. And then the original project for inflation, adjusted for inflation, is $15 million, coming out to $20 million after principal plus interest. We also have included on there alternatives if we were going to spend less money and keep the police department here, like I was talking about last week, but I have a hunch that's going to fall off pretty quickly off the list of options. But that comes out to about a total $14.5 million principal and interest. Then the next 5 sheets, besides,
This is on the new one.
yes,
we have.
and the new one, the next 5
Can we
sheets.
get rid of this one?
Yeah, get rid of the old ones.
All right.
The next 5 show the actual debt and the total payments, all of which were distributed previously to the board, but also shows the annual tax rate attributable to the police fire project over its entire life from 2014 to 2037. So, for example, I'd ask that you turn to the third page of the debt service, which is the Black Mountain Road alternative. Everybody's got that sheet there? On that Black Mountain Road alternative, what we see is that currently we're at about 4 cents on 100 for the existing $5 million that we've borrowed. And in FY17, because the borrowing would come later in the year, and because the initial repayment and interest payments are low in the first year, it would add about $0.015 to the tax rate to do the Black Mountain Road alternative, financed over 20 years. And so we'd be carrying 5.6 cents on 100 in 2017, that being next year. The biggest year for the Black Mountain Road alternative in terms of pennies on 100 attributable directly to the police fire project would be 2018 fiscal year, which is 9.28 cents on 100. And that's something else for us to consider should we decide that we want to proceed forward with the Black Mountain Road alternative with the 2 fire complete renovations. We want to consider that when looking at how much of the fund balance we're applying when, because
Right.
it would smooth out some of the hit this year and next to spread out some of that fund balance. And so we've also then got the last 2 pages, which are the municipal center option A tax rates, and that is option A being the 1-story addition here. And then the last page is the original 2013 plan updated for inflation. That plan shows the top pennies on a dollar being 10.8 in 2018. So under any of these alternatives, the largest year for tax rate increases would be 2018. I know that that's the way we looked at these things before, and it was very helpful.
This is
both.
very helpful.
It was very helpful to us, and it was very helpful for the taxpayers.
Right.
So we added that chart to each of these here.
Yep.
May I just add one
No,
quick?
so you go ahead and now
Yeah.
speak to it. Yeah.
No, that's fine. And that was helpful. Thank you. But I just wanted to make sure that the listeners know, because I know that you're all well aware of this, and I know that anybody who's looking at the document can see it clearly. But all of the figures that you were just describing include not just the police facility portion, but also both fire facilities. The reason we keep referring to the different alternatives by how they relate to the police department is because the fire alternatives are fixed, and the police alternatives have been several.
I need a clarification. I'm back, John.
Okay.
In 17, it goes up $0.015. So right now, our tax rate includes 0.0411 for the debt.
Correct.
So next year, it would be 0.561.
Correct.
Additional to what all the other costs. And then the year after that, it would go up another 3.6 or thereabouts to the 9.
Correct.
So then it goes down to 917.
Right.
So the actual, if nothing else changed, it would go up 9 cents, and that would be our rate. And the next year, it would be a little bit lower. If nothing in our operating budget or anything else changed, it'd be a little bit lower. So the 9 cents we're adding gets a little smaller every year. It's not, this doesn't accumulate down to be like 9,000%. Okay, I just wanted to be real clear about that. So those big year, the first year, well, it's a half. The first full year is the biggest, and then it goes down.
Yes.
Okay. So if we can somehow knock another 4 cents off our tax rate right now, it'd be a wash going
How about that?
Yeah.
There is one way in which this could be, that peak could be reduced, but it comes with,
Splitting
it comes with a impact later in the schedule here, and that is, later in this process, when it comes time to actually borrow the funds and implement the projects, when we consider the relative merits of borrowing from a bank versus going out to the bond market, one of the things that's an advantage about borrowing from a bank is that you can structure it so that right, there's an opportunity to prepay if there was if we had the funds to do that and it was financially wise to do that at some point. But in addition to that, you can flatten out this peak and then the slow drop off that occurs with the debt service on the bonds. So we'll look at real numbers once we have a real project, and we can present information to you at the time when a financing decision needs to be made. But there will be an opportunity to possibly moderate that 3.5 additional cents down to something quite a lot less than that. But what you're going to need to do then is pick up what we collectively will do together is pay then a flat rate of debt service on into those out years.
Right.
There won't be the declining debt service that the bond provides.
And John, what are you figuring for interest rate?
The interest rate on
First page.
It's on the first page? Okay,
Yeah.
understood.
So on the 20-year bond, it's 3.269.
Oh, okay, I see it. Thank you.
Hey, John, on one of the pages, you've got a 10-year bond and then a 20-year bond. I didn't think we ever did a 10-year bond.
We did that because Peter was thinking if we're going to go with the minimum plus plan for the police, that the life of those improvements wouldn't be 20 years.
I
it'd be
know.
10 years. So we would go out with a 10-year bond, and we can do that.
Oh, you can?
You can do that.
Oh, I didn't think we could.
Because you don't want to borrow the money for longer than
What is you're fixing
the
for.
improvement is going to last. Right.
And the minimum prudent really doesn't put us out 10 years.
It certainly doesn't put us out longer than that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we now have a nice set of materials that have been distributed tonight that supplement what we previously had, showing the total costs of various options and the tax rate directly attributable to the project from 2 or 3 years ago through 2037. And I think that addresses the financing related questions, which are number 1 under police fire facilities project. So before moving on to number 2, I want to inquire if there's anybody on the board who's got any inquiries about any of that. How it's calculated, what it shows, or just whether it's an acceptable burden on the taxpayer and the like. Anybody have anything you want to say about that?
I have a question. And my question willingly exposes something that I think is really important for me that I don't know to understand the implications. Would it be potentially more gentle in terms of the value of the project to have, if we were to borrow from a bank and have the tax impact be more consistent year to year? As we get farther out, would that impact feel smaller than it would in the next year or two because of the value, because of income levels could go up? the value, I'm not articulating what I want to say, but I
Yeah,
really want to
no, you are.
understand this. So
I think you articulated
10,
it perfect.
thank you. 10 years from now, what the tax rate would be next year might not feel like such a burden on the taxpayers?
I think you've made a very valid point about how that would feel and the relative value of the money as the 20 years would go by. In addition to that, the bank loan alternative provides flexibility that the bond market does not in terms of even when the payments start. So both in the ramping up and then the level throughout the life, and as Dave mentioned, the opportunity to prepay. So if at some point our town finances were such, or changes in the interest rate environment was such, or there was some reason why it was advantageous for the town to pay off some portion of that debt sooner, we don't have that option with the bond bank, but we do with a bank loan. We can structure the bank loan in that manner. So
So that allows more potential flexibility.
Right.
So as we think about the maximizing the burden on taxpayers, then,
Or minimizing.
minimizing the burden. Thank you. That's an important correction.
Sorry.
No, thank you. So we really need to think about the difference between having a pretty intense increase
right,
soon and then the dropping off of that
right.
impact and stretching it out over a period of time.
Agreed. And we've been bringing you all of the estimates so that it's apples to apples from all
Right.
these different scenarios, using the bond bank information, because that's typically how you would borrow for something of this magnitude. We usually would go to a bank for something smaller.
Right.
We'd bond a facility like this out in the bond market. But it doesn't have to be done that way. We have intended all along that once there's a decision about which project to implement,
Yeah.
as we move forward then over the next several months and we get into the part where we're borrowing and implementing, we need to then bring you some really good detailed information about the options of bond bank versus bank loans so that we can make that decision.
Okay, and my last question is, if there was, at the end of our decision-making, after we have decided how to proceed, and there was going to be a substantial increase to the tax for 2018, are there any unexplored options that we should be considering that would potentially provide relief for that year?
You have to pay the piper
Yes,
at
we
some
do.
point. So the only way to provide relief in 18, other than how we've just described it, you can flatten the whole curve.
Right.
But if what we were going to do was otherwise have it be a curve basically like what we're looking at, but without as high a peak in 18, we'd have to be paying for that throughout some other portion of the
Serious
of the
tax.
debt service, and we won't have the flexibility to structure it that way unless we go to a bank. We do have the flexibility to modify, when we're paying what portion of it if we go to a bank, but with the bond market, this is how it would be structured. And the other way you can lower the annual amount, but then you increase the overall cost of the project, is to bond for more than 20 years or borrow from a bank for more than 20 years. I wouldn't recommend that. It is possible with improvements of this magnitude it's not uncommon to bond them for 25 or for 30 years, but then you pick up a lot of extra interest costs.
Right, okay, thank you.
But there are some other factors that could help to impact the tax rate increases over time. First, it's my understanding that we have significant debt falling off our repayment schedules next year and the year
Right.
after. So in terms of our total current interest and principal payments, 17 to 18 and then to 19, I think there's like a $280,000 drop.
Yeah,
More
it's
than that, says Peter.
$274,000
Says John.
next year, and about $750,000 over the next 8 years. So
that's going to help.
and that was actually reflected in the first
Yeah,
version
right.
of what the materials that were actually in your backup.
Right,
But that included that in that particular table, it included all the debt that's outstanding rather than just the first $5 million on this facility, and that's why we've done the clarification.
And so that's one way. The other way is, again, the fund balance, at least for next year. If we were to split the fund balance out, then we might wind up with a 2-cent increase this year, but then you wind up with 2 cents less next year.
Correct.
Because we're keeping some of that money in the bank for this purpose.
And it wouldn't probably ever be prudent to dip more deeply into that rainy day fund for 1 year.
That's a
I think I-
question.
That's a question. It is a
That's a
question.
Right, so as, for me, as I think about just the tension between the tax burden and the absolute, from my perspective, undeniable need to remedy something that has been broken for such a long time, that's a really pivotal place for me to understand and mine thoroughly. So, thank you, that was helpful.
Anybody else on the board?
Mine goes the other direction a little bit, Donna, on that, is that just in 1 year, look what has happened with inflation and with the cost to build and the prospect of maybe interest rates going up. What is it, about $1 million that it's cost us extra?
On the 2013 project.
The more, and this is what's a little bit frustrating for me, is that the more we put this off, we're just putting the burden onto somebody else, you know, and at some point, somebody's gonna have to bite the bullet, and like you just said, you know, and these have to be done.
And I think we're on the verge of that.
I hope so, because just to put it off is just, I just think is not fair to people down the road.
And it's expensive.
And
to put
and
it
it's
off.
just going to get more expensive. So I hated us to lose that year and add another $1 million to the cost of this, because that's the third floor at Central and more.
And I want to say, I'm very hopeful that all of the conversation and information and the diligence to budgeting and having people have, the access to a really thorough breakdown of the impact, I think that perhaps is what our community has needed in order to feel ready to move forward. And so I'd like to think that that time wasn't wasted, and I'm also really ready to move forward.
I will note, however, that 3.5 years ago, when this was approved the first time, we had the same level of detail.
I wasn't here.
Yeah, I understand.
I believe
I'm just
you.
saying that the model for what I asked for
No,
Right.
this-
when I asked Peter to
Right.
change these charts a little bit was to go back to the full scope of the way the data had been available
Yes.
when we did this.
I should have known.
But this was
Town
helpful, I
meeting in
think,
October.
more than any other page that we've had.
Oh, yeah.
Are these.
Right.
Because it shows you,
Right.
you know, the debt service, you know, what it's going to cost us. So
Anybody else on the board?
Beating it.
Anybody who's in attendance wants to speak to any of these financing-related issues? Mr. DeGray?
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your comment about 3 years ago. We had the same handout. My question for John, I think we had the number of dwellings in the community by 100,000, 150,000 that would be affected by this, that I think would be useful for the board. So you would have, if we have 300 houses in Brattleboro that are assessed at $100,000. I think we had that information. I think that would be pertinent, actually, to look at, maybe to help you with your deliberation.
That's really something from the lister, I would think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we can get that.
Anybody else who's in attendance wants to speak to issues relating to the financing questions, debt service, operating budget forecast, property tax impacts? All right, so the next item on the police fire facilities project, continuing agenda, is life cycle cost analysis between Black Mountain Road and Municipal Center alternatives. Peter?
Yes, here it's a memorandum dated January 6th that was in your backup materials, and the bottom line conclusion is that after fully examining the costs over the 20-year period of the debt service, we can confidently predict that the life cycle cost at of the Black Mountain Road alternative would either equal or be less than the life cycle cost of the option A here at the municipal center. Particularly, the reason you asked us to look at this was that it had been suggested, and it was a fair concern, that the costs of operating a separate facility on a separate property with another boiler and another roof and another set of systems, plumbing and electrical and all the maintenance, internal and external to such a facility, that those costs might exceed over the 20-year period the savings of having $1 million less capital cost on the front end, and then the related cost of paying off that debt. Based on the analysis, and I can go through it in some detail if you'd like me to, but based on the analysis that we did and what's represented here in the memo, depending on the rental of the facilities that would be vacated here at the municipal center, if we do continue to maintain town offices here at the municipal center for that entire 20 years, if we do lease out the vacated space that when the police department has moved to the north, then depending on the capacity of that, if we had a lot of vacancy, then the two costs end up coming closer to being equal. If we were completely vacant the entire time, which is not likely, but in worst case scenario, then we break even. Likely we would have some of the space rented some of the time. If we had all of the space rented all of the time, we would be about $60,000 to the good annually during the 20-year period. So, you know, where we would land on that continuum between totally full all the time and totally empty all the time is anybody's guess, but the likelihood is that it would be slightly better financially to go to Black Mountain Road.
But one of the options that we haven't touched on, and I kind of don't want to bring it up, but I think I will anyways, because we really don't know what's going to happen until the first thing happens. I mean, because there are other options. I mean, we could sell the building. We could give the building to the state of Vermont. We could, I think there's other options for this building than just either we're going to be in it or we're not going to be in it, or we're going to lease part of it or we're not going to lease part of it. There are other options.
There absolutely are, and we talked about some of those last time. You named a couple of viable alternatives just now. If indeed the decision is to move the police department up to Black Mountain Road, then there will be a whole additional analysis that needs to be done about what is the best course of action with this building. And it certainly involves alternatives different than just leasing the vacant space. For the purposes of doing this exercise for life cycle costing,
you had to start somewhere.
We'd be speculating about anything other than just continuing to own the building and renting the space at a pretty low cost, given the condition of the building. We recognize, you're not going to be renting it at nice office building rates, so we looked at $7 a square foot as the rental rate if we were able to fill space in the building.
I just wanted, that people out in TV land and in the audience, that there are other options, and so that we're not just, at some point. But again, we really don't know until.
That's right.
Until we get over this hurdle.
We need to face those questions in context.
Exactly.
Yep.
So.
Anything else from the board? Anybody on the board relating to the life cycle cost question? I'll note that one of the select board members had to leave for a family obligation, so we're now a board of 4. If you want to move over, that's fine, but you don't have to.
I do want to move over.
Is there anybody who's in attendance who wants to speak to the life cycle cost related issues? Anybody? All right. And then the next item on the police fire project agenda is the preliminary results from the questionnaire. So, Peter?
Yes. As of 4:30 this afternoon, we had received 421 responses to the questionnaire, and if it's okay with the board, for the benefit of the public, I'll just go through each of the questions and where we stand. And I'll say first that the SurveyMonkey tool is going to stay open and available out on the internet. You can go to the town's website and go to the upper right-hand corner of the homepage and click a link and be right into the survey. So we hope that a lot more people from the community will participate. Anybody from the community that doesn't go online and do things like SurveyMonkey responses is also invited to just contact the town manager's office, and we'll be happy to provide a paper copy of this same survey so they can complete that and we can tabulate that into the final results.
Peter, are you happy with the SurveyMonkey?
Yeah, the SurveyMonkey is working great.
It is,
So
okay.
we will, it's a $300 for the annual
Right.
subscription for it.
So we can use it for others?
So we can use it for many other
That's great.
occasions when we're looking for this kind of engagement with the community. I think it's really an important step forward for us in terms of how we
Right.
bring the public into
Yeah.
to participating in town government. And here are the preliminary results as of 4:30 this afternoon.
That was a drum roll.
70, I'm going to round to the nearest full percent. So 77% are saying yes to the full renovation that's recommended at the Central Fire Station. 23% no. On the related question of whether to do additional work at the Central Fire Station to either restore the
Third floor.
the top floor that has been eliminated. In the planning process, we've eliminated the top floor of the addition as a cost savings measure. So the question is whether to add that back in, whether to build some structure that's sufficient to hold an additional floor in the future, or whether to just build it as designed. 43% are saying build the additional story now. 29% say make sure it's strong enough to hold an additional story in the future. And 29% are saying just build it as designed without the additional structural work. On the question of whether to do just the minimum prudent improvements at the Central Fire Station, 77% say don't do that, and 23% say do it.
And that, we'll note, is exactly the flip side of the first question,
That's
which
correct.
is do the full scope now.
On the West Brattleboro Fire Station, the question of whether to do it fully as designed and recommended, 76% say yes and 24% say no. On the question of whether to do just the $400,000 minimum prudent plan at the West Brattleboro Fire Station, 79% say no and 21% say yes. On a question of moving the police department to Black Mountain Road, the 60% say yes and 40% say no. On the question of renovating and adding to the municipal center for the police department in the full scope of the option A here, 67% say no and 33% say yes. And on the question of doing just the partial minimum prudent plan here at the municipal center for the police department, 77% say no and 23% say yes.
It is.
There was the question that arose partway through the public discussions of this, our public meetings, about possibly doing the work in phases rather than as a three-part project altogether. 75% say do them together now rather than, and 25% say do them in phases. And finally, there was the four-part question of clustering the projects. This was basically a pick one. Which would you prefer to move forward with? 51% say proceed with the full-scale renovations of Central Fire and West Brattleboro Fire and moving the police department to Black Mountain Road. 20% say renovate on the full scale and renovate and expand on the full scale for Central Fire and the West Brattleboro Fire and keep the police department at the municipal center with the full scope of the improvements, option A. 15% say do the minimum prudent improvements for the police and fire facilities, and 13% say some other combination of projects. And the last question was just people filling in their names, which most people did.
Is that what you think it shows?
I think that's what it shows, yeah. We actually I haven't seen individual responses, but it appears based on, with SurveyMonkey, you have to create a choice. So on this final spot where it was just entering the name, people had to click on it and then enter in their name. And it appears, based on the results that are showing here, that 86% of the people have actually given us their names. It's possible, actually, that it was the other way, but
Because it says 144 answered, 277 skipped.
aha.
So there may
But
be
this
a
doesn't add,
who
but this
skipped.
doesn't add up right. This adds maybe,
Yeah, and that's,
do you know what I mean? It's weird.
actually, that's a fair point. So 277 people
There
skipped
you
the
go.
question.
Yeah.
So it looks as though somewhere between 19 and 144 people gave us their names. In any event, you had some consideration last time of whether that was going to be useful or not. Anyway, the point of this wasn't to identify folks. It was just to maintain integrity to the survey process. We have learned that each IP address is only able to be used one time. So anybody who wanted to submit a bunch of responses would have to go around and use a bunch of different computers to do it. So
But that means that more than-
that protects the credibility of the outcome.
That also means that two people in a household can answer
Not on the same computer, that's
separately
true.
on the same computer.
That is what that means.
So on SurveyMonkey, is there a way of telling whether they're from Brattleboro or, I mean, anybody
No,
could? So
we didn't
anybody-
ask
okay.
that question,
No,
so
no,
it
that's
is
fine.
possible some of these respondents are from outside of town.
Okay. Okay.
So
Interesting.
anybody have any questions about the survey data? Anybody on the board or anybody who's in attendance? So I then want to talk a little bit about the procedure, how we're going to be moving forward with this question. At the January 25th meeting, which is a special meeting, we will be finalizing the warning for the March 1st ballot and the March 19th town meeting. We then have through February 11 to finalize warning for both a special town meeting and a ballot at the special town meeting to be convened on Saturday, March 12th, which is the plan to have the special town meeting relating to the police fire. We're probably going to need to, not probably, we're going to need to make a decision about how the ballot item is going to be formulated and presented to the voters at town meeting, because it's a town meeting representative ballot item on March 12th. And there are essentially three potential sets of choices, and I just want to present them now for everybody to begin thinking about them. One alternative is just to present one broad ballot item. Let's say that the board ultimately reaches decision to endorse and present to the voters police fire project that includes moving police to Black Mountain Road. We could then present one ballot question saying, will we bond for a total of 9 million more in order to build to build an addition onto fire and to replace to Central Fire, to replace West Brattleboro Station, and to purchase a reformer property and build the police there. We could do one $9 million, $9.5 million item, recognizing that we've already borrowed 5 for that purpose. We can warn those and present them separately to the voters, asking them if they want to spend the money and bond for the Central Fire work, the West Brattleboro work, and the Putney Road option. Again, having endorsed a specific alternative for each one, but warn them separately and have people vote on them separately. Or we can present
A lot of
smorgasbord. We could do a cascade.
a plethora.
A myriad of alternatives. I'm finding it very, very difficult to conceive of how you do a binding ballot item that has alternatives like the survey. The survey wound up working great.
Yes.
But I don't think you can do that for ballot
No.
items. So ultimately, I think, based upon everything I've heard from people who've spoken with us and what I've heard from the board, we're probably going to wind up focusing in on one recommended alternative.
Yes.
Yes.
And then we'll have to decide whether we warn it as a single bond item or for each of the 3 separate projects. Preliminarily, I'm in favor of doing one
Single.
broad
Good.
item.
Me too.
Good.
One broad item. So, but that's a decision that's going to have to be made. We'll talk about it further in the coming weeks, both at the meeting on the 19th if we want to, and then potentially at the meeting on the 25th, because we're going to have to be working towards having that language
Ready.
ready when we are voting on the warning itself. So we probably have to make that decision no later than the February 2nd meeting
Oh, God, yeah.
about alternatives and how we want to present that to the voters so that we can have the warning drafted and reviewed for legal before we're finally voting on that no later than Thursday, the 11th of February, which is the last day to warn it for a March 12th Saturday town meeting and town meeting ballot item. So those are some procedural things we're going to have to talk about. Peter, what are the remaining, if any, topic-related agenda items about police fire? Are there any?
There are none. This was the final evening of the several in a row that we've had where we've addressed different topics. So now it's just a matter of making the decision about how to put it on in front of the representative town meeting.
David, do you think it's worth having anybody speak? I mean, this is.
Well, I mean,
you know,
we're
Right.
gonna open it up to
Okay.
the floor for any
Yeah.
comments people may have. Anybody on the board want to speak to any of those procedural issues now?
No, but can I just say
Procedural?
one? Oh,
Procedural.
Not procedural.
All right. Kate?
well, I should have said this earlier. I love the survey, but it's 50-50. I mean, that's what's interesting about these results. It's 50-50. So,
It's
I had to say that because it's
It's
so interesting to
50-50
me
just on,
where we go. I don't want to get into that because we haven't had a chance to look them all, but you just look at it, it's so interesting, which makes our procedural thing.
It's, although
It's
the individual
interesting.
components of that 50% package are 75% each.
That's right.
right.
Yeah. Well, that's what's interesting about
Right,
this whole thing.
right.
That's not about procedure. I just was sitting here looking at this like, oh my God, it's so interesting. We did a survey and it's pretty much 50-50.
Good. Anybody who's in attendance want to speak to any of those questions about how we're going to present this? Dick?
I just want to go on record, I do have a chip in the hat for Powerball. If I do hit it, I will pay for the facility.
Yeah, you told me that.
I actually just whispered in Bobby's ear, the issue with the bond that was approved before and then moving forward has to be undone some way, somehow. How will that affect what happens moving forward with your deliberations?
Oh, I think that the voters gave us authority
Right.
to borrow that money. But should we decide not to borrow that money and then get different authority to do something different, that's all we need.
Yeah.
Unless Bob disagrees.
We've got a lot of work to do on how we're going to word the actual warning,
The new warning.
the new warning.
Right.
And there's a lot that will go into that, but it will take into account the authorized but unissued portion of the
Right.
2012 authorized bond. So,
Right.
I have a call into Vermont Bond Council. I was not able to reach them earlier this afternoon, but we're working on that. We just need a little bit more of a decision from the board, and then we'll zero in on that language.
Because that warning never changed. I mean, that bond has never changed. It's still sitting there.
That authority.
Correct.
And that authority is still there.
That's correct, but as we discussed last winter, if we're going to go to Black Mountain Road, then we'll need that authority to be reallocated
Right.
to be usable for the Black Mountain Road location as opposed to here at the Municipal Center for the Police Department. So the point's well taken that there's work to do to address the continued use of those funds for the purpose that would be approved this time around, along with approving the new debt. Whether it would take the form of rescinding and then creating the new bond allocation or bond authority, or whether it would just be reauthorizing the old, is something we'll be working on.
The point to be made is that you would not be authorizing the town to issue bonds twice or add it on top of one another.
Exactly.
It's still going to be within a certain amount. So
Yeah.
we'll work on the language.
We'll make it nice and clear for when we're ready to actually bring you something to approve for the warning.
Any other comments or questions from anybody who's in attendance about those financing related issues? Ms. Humphries?
Lester Humphreys, Town of Brattleboro. The question was raised about this borrowing causing some spikes in the tax rate based on different, different events. I'm wondering if there's a possibility of borrowing a little bit more to smooth out some of those spikes.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I guess we need some clarification. What do you mean, please?
If the town has some the ability to bond a little bit larger, then the extra cash could be used to smooth out the spikes in different years.
The spike is in a single year if we do with the bond bank. So what happens is the first year you just make a partial payment, and then the first full year payment is the largest payment ever. The reason for that is that the principal payments are equal throughout the 20 years. And so you're that first full year is the largest interest payment, and then it goes down gradually until you're done paying it off. So it's not like there's cycles to smooth.
Okay.
If the board ultimately chooses to go for a flat payback schedule rather than that, beginning at the peak and going and declining throughout the life of the debt, the way to do that would be through the bank, because you can't structure it differently through the bond. The bond payback will always be like that, but through a bank loan we could structure it with the bank to be flat payback.
Yeah, I understand that those are two possibilities, but I was adding a third, which would be that if you borrowed an extra amount of money, you could use that money
I
to
understand.
reduce the
Right.
rate in that year,
Yes.
2018.
You could, but you'd also be paying interest.
Sure,
Then a
you're
higher
right.
amount of interest because you'd have a higher principal.
Yes, it would increase the total cost over the 20 years.
Correct.
So there's a cost for doing that, but there's also a cost to switching to a bank loan, which might have a higher rate than bonds. So I was just adding a third possibility to do the math on.
Okay.
And I think I understand that. Look, if we took out another $500,000, we could use that in year 18 and
things out.
just to smooth things out and,
And there would be a cost for that.
Right.
So you need to look
Right.
at it, as adding a
Right.
third way to possibility.
Any other comments or questions about any of the matters we've talked about relating to police fire so far? I'm just going to note, and I think that other people are probably going to comment as well. Following my suggestion last week that the $2.5 million alternative here at the Municipal Center should be explored more thoroughly, we had the opportunity yesterday, a number of board members, to go on tour of the facility and look at potential plans relating to that $2.5 million alternative. What I would note is that the $2.5 million alternative is really very, very preliminary in concept at this point. it recognizes that renovations of 10,000 square feet at $250 a square foot would buy us some good renovation, and addresses way preliminarily where some of the parts of the police department operations would go. And it includes some very interesting components. For example, it proposes and contemplates that the public hallway on the first floor of the municipal center would be closed to public traffic and would be incorporated into the police department. I think that there are a number of very interesting possibilities within that $2.5 million alternative. But I think it's probably fair to say that the scope of the work that needs to be done here at the municipal center, probably based upon what I saw yesterday, exceeds that $2.5 million figure. And the $2.5 million alternative does not provide for rehabilitation of the existing cell blocks and for moving those cell blocks in a manner that would really necessarily fix the egress the way we've talked about it. There might be a possibility of having an addition that had cell blocks and cell blocks and sally port. There may be other alternatives relating to that, but at this point, the $2.5 million alternative would require probably, as I understand it, about $100,000 worth of design work in order to get to a point where it really could be thought about concretely. And at least preliminarily, what I'm hearing is that there's very substantial support for the Black Mountain Road alternative, both among the public and I think probably within a majority of the board, which is the way it's been for about a year and a half now. So we will discuss this going forward, but based upon what I'm hearing, we probably will not be pursuing the $2.5 million alternative particularly fervently for too long, because I don't think that there's going to be majority board support for it. And there's too much work that needs to be done in the building to make it really a long-term alternative at this point, based on what I saw when I went throughout the building.
Well, David, what makes me feel good about that is that you took the time to analyze it and to come forth with, a concern, and then to have it, to go through the steps to have it realized and looking at it. So I think that's, I just don't know, how much more we can do to wrap our heads around this. There's nobody on this board and there's nobody in this room that wants to raise taxes. I mean, I think that's the last thing that people want to do. But again, somebody has to, make that step forward. And, Donna, you were going to say something, so I'll let you.
Yeah, so I've been thinking since I went on that tour, I've been thinking a lot about what I saw, and it's not that I hadn't pictured what the facilities were like. And years ago, I was down in the holding cell area briefly. But I was...
For anything special? Or?
Yeah. I think I'll leave that out. You can check my criminal history. I don't have one, really. But I was really disturbed and not saddened, but it was an emotional experience for me to take a look at the place where we have our law enforcement officers trying to do their jobs. It was a very problematic environment. And what I respect is that during those 3 presentations that I sat through, I heard really accurate, undramatic descriptions of issues. It's an entirely different thing to go down and take a look and see the walls that are covered with mildew, the places where the water is pooling on the floor, to really think about what it would be like to be in the presence of an intoxicated person, an angry person, someone who uses violence, and trying to maintain safety in passing through that hallway. And I left feeling like my instinct was completely confirmed that it is unconscionable for us to ask so much from people whose work is essential and necessary for the safety of this whole community. And when I was reflecting back to the beginning of my time serving on this board, you know, I heard some people who were worried about tax rates, and I heard comments like, you know, we don't need a state-of-the-art facility, but we have individuals who are risking their lives for real issues, and they're working in a dungeon. And as a member of this community, that's not okay with me. And as a member of this board, I feel extremely responsible for, you know, communicating that in a way so that anyone who hasn't had the opportunity to see what I saw yesterday has a sense that we are not being asked to provide a luxury level environment for anyone. We are being asked that people who are doing essential work have a facility that enables them to do their work. And I was just grateful for that, because it was a conclusion that I had made internally, looking at all the information, hearing from many individuals about the problems. And the same is true for the fire department. I have been in both buildings. I have seen it with my own eyes. And I feel like at this point, it's really clear that we need to not have people doing work in that environment. I believe that our challenges as a community are going to continue to necessitate outstanding, you know, police and fire work. We ask for state-of-the-art services in this community, and we owe it to those who have done this work patiently over a long period of time to move forward, and we need to do that in a timely fashion. So thank you. I wanted to say that. I felt strongly about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Anybody else on the board? Anybody else who's in attendance want to speak to any of the issues relating to police fire? We will continue, as has been our practice, to put the police fire project on the weekly agenda on the 19th, maybe the 25th, with the goal of having a decision made by the 2nd, so that we can then warn the meeting before the 11th to have a special town meeting on March 12th, and then proceed from there to the regular town meeting on the 19th, but where we'll deal with the operating budget, capital budget, and other issues as a whole. Anything further on police fire right now? So the next item, and then the last item on tonight's agenda, public meeting agenda, is the FY17 budget. The only real issue I'm aware of at this point relating to the FY17 budget is the use of the fund balance. And once again, I'm not sure that, well, I don't know how we want to proceed. How does everybody want to proceed?
Let's just use it. Okay.
I mean, we have this sheet here that was distributed last week and is being distributed again this week, saying that if we use all the fund balance above the 10% guideline this year, our taxes are going to go up by 2/3 of a penny. If we use if we use half of the fund balance this year, that's above 10% guideline, and half next year, our tax rate will go up 1.85 cents. And if we use all the fund balance in 2018, then this year the tax rate would go up 3 cents. Using the Black Mountain Road alternative, if we use all the fund balance this year, then we could anticipate a likely tax increase next year, assuming a 2% operating budget increase of 8 cents. We would come down to 6.88 cents next year with a 2% operating budget increase if we use half the fund balance this year and half next year. And if we defer use of the fund balance in excess of 10%, all to 2018, then next year's tax increase would probably be around 5.7 cents.
You want my opinion? Or
Yes, please.
There you go. Well, I haven't changed. I'm an optimist, so I think that we go year to year. We always seem to have a little extra money left over. So I'm just for using it this year, the whole 270. Is it 74? Right?
268.
268, 450 on this year's. Because I think we do go on a year-to-year basis on this. We never know what we're going to have next year. So, but I'm an optimist, and the last years that I've been on here, we've always had a surplus, and I'm just hoping that next year we have the same surplus or even better. So, I'm in favor of using it all this year.
I've come down to half this year and half next year.
Yeah, that's where I am too. I just think we need to,
Yeah.
and again, we don't know which one we're doing, but I'm assuming I know which one we're doing.
I don't mind 3 against 1. I have no problem with that.
Oh, I wasn't thinking about that. I wasn't thinking about your feelings.
Well, thanks. And I wasn't thinking about yours a little while ago. So, I wasn't
I
thinking
originally
about your
was in favor of
feelings.
putting it all in next year's. But for me, it's also linked to whether the impact is going to really hit in 2018, or whether we're going to opt for a different borrowing from a bank and therefore spreading out the impact. In which case, I would be in favor of half this year and half next year.
So
But not
Peter,
all this year.
What's that?
But not all this
Not
year.
all this year.
Okay, fine.
So I think, Peter, what I'll ask is that you now prepare is there anybody who's in attendance who wants to speak to any issues related to use of fund balance in connection with this year's FY17 budget? So, Peter, I'm going to ask, please, that for our next meeting, a version 2 of the budget be prepared that shows all the changes that have been made over the course of all of our budget meetings since November, and applies fund balance as previously indicated for various specific projects, both from the operating fund surplus and the capital surplus, and then applies half of the excess fund balance over to 10% guideline to defray the cost of, to defray taxes in 2017. So if we can prepare that for next week, and we can review that, we may be able to approve that budget next week, along with all the other town meeting warning items that are ready next week, and then approve the final warning on the 25th of January.
Correct.
Any further discussion about anything relating to the FY17 budget? Is there any further business to come in front of the meeting tonight? Oh, rents. Any other business to come in front of the public meeting tonight? I move to enter executive session to discuss collective bargaining agreements, contracts, and probable litigation where premature general public knowledge would place the municipality, people and parties involved, and the town at a substantial disadvantage. And I invite the town manager and the town attorney and the assistant.
And the assistant town manager and the public works director.
And the assistant town manager and the public works director into the executive session. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, abstaining? That carries 4-0. I want to note that there will be no decisions made in the executive session. And when we rise from executive session, the only matter we'll consider will be a motion to adjourn. We won't reconvene to conduct any business. So this is, except for our adjournment motion, the end of the public meeting. We want to thank everybody who has been watching on BCTV live or recorded. Want to thank everybody who's been in attendance. Thank you BCTV operators, members of the press, and ASL interpreters, everybody who's been in attendance. Good night, enjoy the snow.